Blackwater Grave by Kailan Pitre. Dedication. For the forgotten, for the unnamed, for the stories buried beneath the surface, and for those who keep asking questions when everyone else has stopped looking. Author's note. Blackwater Grave began with a simple question. Like many stories, it arrived unexpectedly. I was driving through southeast Texas, passing a wastewater facility surrounded by floodwater, marshland, and open fields. The kind of place most people see every day without a second thought. Then a question surfaced. What if something was hidden there, not just beneath the water, beneath the history, beneath the records, beneath the stories people tell themselves about a place? That question eventually became Blackwater County. The people in this novel are fictional, the events are fictional, yet the themes that inspired them are very real. Across the world, there are forgotten communities, missing records, erased histories, abandoned places, and stories waiting for someone willing to ask questions. At its heart, Blackwater Grave is not simply a horror story. It is a story about memory, about what happens when truth is buried, about the people who choose to remember when remembering is inconvenient, and about the idea that sometimes the landscape itself becomes a witness. If you joined Lena on her journey through Blackwater County, thank you. There are many stories hidden beneath the surface of the world around us. This one just happened to rise with the floodwater. Chapter 1. The Smell Before the Storm. The smell hit Lena before she reached the curve in the highway. Most people who lived near Blackwater County learned to ignore it. They rolled up their windows, turned up the radio, and drove a little faster whenever they passed the wastewater ponds. The odor came and went with the wind, becoming part of the landscape the same way power lines and drainage ditches did. Tonight was different. The smell was not merely unpleasant. It felt alive. Lena lowered her music and looked toward the dark stretch of water beyond the chain-link fence. The settling ponds reflected the last orange light of sunset, their surfaces smooth as glass. A few city trucks sat parked near the far basin, their hazard lights blinking red against the coming dark. That alone was strange. Nobody worked out there this late unless something had gone wrong. Lena eased her foot off the gas. A worker stood near the fence with one hand pressed over his mouth. Another man pointed toward the pond, but no one moved closer. They all stared at the same place near the muddy edge, where the water had pulled back after days of heat. Something pale rested along the shoreline. At first, Lena thought it was a discarded bag. Then the shape shifted. Not much, just enough. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. For one impossible second, it looked like a human hand reaching out of the mud. A horn blasted behind her. Lena jumped. A pickup truck swerved around her car, the driver throwing up an irritated hand as he sped past. The moment broke. When she looked back toward the pond, the shape was still there, motionless now. Just debris. Probably. That was what she told herself as she pressed the gas and continued down the highway. Still, she checked her rearview mirror twice before the facility disappeared behind a line of pine trees. The sun sank below the horizon. Darkness settled quickly across the flat Texas landscape. Fields stretched for miles on either side of the road. Water stood in the low places from storms earlier in the week. Egrets moved through the marsh grass like pale ghosts, while mosquitoes gathered in thick clouds over the ditches. Lena reached for the notebook that always rode in her passenger seat. Most people used phones. She preferred paper. The notebook was filled with half-finished story ideas, interview notes, and observations gathered during long drives through southeast Texas. Without taking her eyes from the road, she scribbled a quick line. Workers gathered at wastewater pond. Something in mud. Investigate later. She closed the notebook and laughed softly. Always looking for a story. The truth was, she couldn't help herself. For nearly 10 years, Lena had made a living writing about forgotten places, local legends, and strange events most newspapers ignored. Small-town mysteries sold surprisingly well online. People loved reading about abandoned hospitals, haunted bridges, and unsolved disappearances. Most stories turned out to have perfectly ordinary explanations. Some did not. A light rain began tapping against the windshield. She switched on the wipers. The weather forecast had warned of a major storm system moving in from the Gulf. If the predictions were correct, Blackwater County would receive several days of rain. Flooding was almost guaranteed. The thought made her glance toward the dark clouds gathering along the southern horizon. They looked wrong. Not dangerous, not yet. Just heavy, as if something enormous waited inside them. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the gravel driveway of her small house outside town. The property had belonged to her grandmother once. A modest place surrounded by oak trees and overgrown fields. The porch light glowed warmly against the darkness. Normally, the sight relaxed her. Tonight, it didn't. Lena stepped from the car and immediately smelled it again. The odor from the ponds, faint but present. She frowned. The treatment facility sat nearly 10 miles away. The wind shouldn't have carried it this far, yet there it was, rotting, chemical, sweet in a way that made her stomach tighten. A distant roll of thunder echoed across the countryside. Somewhere beyond the fields, a dog began barking. Then another, then several more. The sounds spread through the darkness like a chain reaction. Lena stood motionless, listening. The dogs weren't barking at each other. They were all focused on something else, something far away. A sudden unease crawled across her skin. The feeling lasted only a moment before the barking stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Silence returned. Even the insects seemed quieter. "You're letting your imagination get ahead of you," she muttered. She grabbed her bag and headed inside. But long after she locked the door, she found herself thinking about the pale shape at the edge of the pond. And somewhere beyond the dark windows of the house, rain clouds continued gathering over Blackwater County. The storm was coming, and beneath the settling ponds, something was waiting for it. Chapter 2. Floodwater. Lena woke to the sound of rain hammering against her roof. For a moment, she lay still beneath the blankets, listening. The storm had arrived sometime during the night. Water rattled through the gutters. Wind pushed against the old house, causing the wooden walls to creak softly. Every few seconds, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the countryside. The digital clock beside her bed read 6:17 a.m. Outside, dawn was little more than a gray smear behind thick clouds. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. The smell was still there. Faint, almost impossible to notice. Yet now that she was aware of it, she couldn't ignore it. That strange mixture of stagnant water, chemicals, and something organic beneath it all. Something rotten. Lena shook her head. She was letting the image from the pond get inside her head. Nothing more. She showered, dressed, and carried a cup of coffee onto the covered porch. Rain fell in sheets across the fields surrounding her property. The drainage ditch along the road was already overflowing. Water rushed through the grass in muddy streams. Another day of this, and half the county would be underwater. Her phone buzzed, a text message from her cousin Rachel. "You seeing what's going on online?" Before Lena could respond, another message appeared. "Check Blackwater Community Watch." Lena opened the local social media group. Immediately, she saw why Rachel had messaged her. A photograph sat at the top of the page. The image was blurry and clearly taken from a moving vehicle, but the subject was unmistakable. Something pale floated in a flooded drainage canal. At first glance, it resembled a log. At second glance, it looked alarmingly human. The comments beneath the image were multiplying by the minute. "Anybody know what this is? Looks like a mannequin. No way that's a mannequin. My husband works for the county and says they're shutting down access to the canal. That's a body. Delete this before people start rumors. Lena zoomed in. The photo quality was terrible. Still, her stomach tightened. The object appeared to have a shoulder, maybe even part of a face. Another post appeared while she watched. A different angle, taken farther downstream. The image lasted less than 3 seconds before disappearing. Deleted. Lena refreshed the page. Gone. She frowned. Then more posts vanished, one after another. Within 10 minutes, every photograph had disappeared from the group. Only the arguments remained. People demanded answers. Others accused them of spreading panic. Several commenters claimed police had already visited homes asking residents to remove pictures. That caught Lena's attention. If the images were fake, nobody would care. If they were real, why remove them? The rain intensified. Thunder shook the windows. Lena stood and stared across the flooded fields. Something felt wrong. Not supernatural? Not yet. Just wrong. The kind of feeling she had learned to trust after years of chasing stories. Her phone rang. Rachel. Lena answered. You see it? I saw the photos. What do you think? Lena hesitated. I think somebody doesn't want those pictures online. There was a brief silence. Exactly. Rachel lowered her voice. My friend works dispatch. Okay. She says police have been running calls around the treatment plant since before dawn. Lena's grip tightened around the phone. What kind of calls? Nobody knows. Nobody or she won't tell you. Both. Rain hammered the porch roof. The storm seemed darker now, closer. Rachel continued. People are saying they found remains. Lena stared at the horizon. The wastewater facility sat somewhere beyond the curtains of rain, invisible. You believe that? I don't know what I believe. Rachel paused. But remember those workers you told me about yesterday? A chill crept through Lena. She had only mentioned them briefly. Yeah. My husband drove past there at 5 this morning. And? There were twice as many trucks. Lena said nothing. County trucks, police vehicles, state vehicles. The unease returned, stronger this time. What are you thinking? Rachel asked. Lena looked toward the dark sky. The answer came immediately. The same thing I always think. Rachel laughed. Which is? That somebody's hiding something. After hanging up, Lena spent the next hour searching public records, local news feeds, and county emergency reports. Nothing. No accidents. No spills. No emergency statements. Nothing connected to the treatment plant at all, which made the silence feel even louder. By noon, the rain had become relentless. Roads throughout the county were beginning to flood. Schools dismissed early. Businesses closed. Water pooled across parking lots and fields. Then another photograph surfaced. This one appeared on an account belonging to a teenager. The image showed a flooded drainage ditch several miles from the wastewater facility. Brown water filled the channel. Tree branches floated along the current, and lodged against a culvert pipe was something white, something unmistakable, a human bone. Lena stared at the photograph. Her heartbeat quickened. The post remained online for less than 5 minutes. Then it vanished, deleted, just like the others. She grabbed her keys. Outside, thunder cracked overhead. Rain slashed across the windshield as she climbed into her car. Every instinct she possessed told her to stay home. Wait for the weather to pass. Mind her own business. Instead, she started the engine. Because somewhere between the treatment ponds and the flooded canals, something had surfaced. And Lena intended to find out what it was. Chapter 3. The Bone. The rain showed no signs of stopping. By the time Lena reached the outskirts of town, entire sections of roadway had disappeared beneath muddy water. Orange barricades blocked several intersections. Drainage ditches that were normally shallow trickles had become rushing brown channels carrying branches, trash, and anything else unfortunate enough to get caught in the current. Her windshield wipers struggled to keep up. The closer she drove toward the location from the photograph, the more emergency vehicles she saw. Not enough to attract statewide attention, but enough to raise questions. A sheriff's deputy sat parked beside a flooded roadway near the canal. His lights flashed silently against the gray afternoon. Lena drove past once, then twice. On the third pass, she found a side road leading toward a row of houses overlooking the drainage channel. She parked beneath a cluster of oak trees and continued on foot. The rain soaked her jacket within minutes. The canal lay about 200 yards beyond the houses. Normally, it would have been little more than a drainage ditch. Today, it looked like a river. Water churned through the channel with surprising force. Lena carefully stepped down the muddy embankment. The photograph had shown the bone near a concrete culvert. She scanned the area. Nothing. Just floodwater. Tree limbs. Debris. Then she noticed movement farther down the bank. 3 teenagers stood beneath an umbrella near the edge of the canal. One of them immediately recognized her. "You the writer?" Lena smiled. "Depends who's asking." The boy shrugged. "My mom reads your stuff." His friends exchanged nervous looks. "You took the picture?" Lena asked. The teenager hesitated. "Maybe." "Maybe?" His expression told her everything. "You're the one who posted it." The boy glanced toward the road as if expecting someone to appear. "They made me delete it." "Who did?" "Deputy?" Lena's attention sharpened. "A deputy came to your house?" The teenager nodded. "About 20 minutes after I posted it." "That's fast." "Yeah." "What did he say?" The boy kicked at the mud. "Said it wasn't human." "What was it then?" "He didn't know." Lena folded her arms. "He didn't know, but he knew enough to tell you to remove the photo?" The teenager gave a nervous laugh. "Pretty much." One of his friends finally spoke. "We saw it." Lena turned. "Saw what?" "The bone. Up close." The girl's face had gone pale. "It wasn't fake." A gust of wind rattled the nearby trees. The rushing water seemed louder suddenly. "What kind of bone?" Lena asked. The teenagers exchanged looks. The first boy swallowed. "It looked like a leg bone." Nobody spoke for several seconds. The only sound came from the rain. Lena studied their faces. They were scared, not excited, not playing a prank. Scared. "Where is it now?" The girl pointed downstream. "County workers took it." "When?" "This morning." Lena looked toward the canal. Something about the story bothered her. If the county believed the bone belonged to an animal, why respond so quickly? Why remove photographs? Why visit people's homes? A sharp crack echoed through the trees. Everyone jumped. The sound came from farther down the canal, a branch snapping, or something larger. The teenagers immediately backed away from the water. One of them laughed nervously. "We're leaving." Within seconds, they were climbing the embankment. Lena watched them go. Then she turned back toward the canal. The water had risen noticeably since her arrival. Several feet from shore, a cluster of debris rotated slowly within an eddy. Branches, leaves, trash, and something white. Her breath caught. The object surfaced briefly before sinking again. Too fast to identify, but long enough to make her stomach tighten. A flash of lightning illuminated the canal. For an instant, she thought she saw more white shapes beneath the surface. Not one, several. Then darkness returned. The current shifted. Everything vanished. Lena stood frozen. A rational explanation existed. There had to be one. Floodwaters unearthed all kinds of things, animal remains. construction debris, old refuse. She knew that. Yet the feeling remained. The feeling that she was looking at something she wasn't supposed to see. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? For several seconds, all she heard was static. Rain hissed through the speaker. Then a man's voice. Low. Breathing heavily. You're asking questions. Lena straightened. Who is this? The man ignored her. They found another one. The word sent a chill through her. Found another what? Silence. Then, a body. Lightning flashed again. Closer now. Lena's pulse quickened. Who is this? You need to stop digging. The line crackled. The man sounded terrified, not threatening, terrified. They know people are looking. Who knows? No answer. Only heavy breathing. Then the man spoke again. They come out during floods. Lena frowned. What comes out? A long pause followed. When the voice finally returned, it was barely above a whisper. The dead. The call disconnected. Lena stared at her phone. The screen displayed no caller information. Unknown. The rain continued falling. The canal surged beside her. And for the first time since spotting the pale shape at the wastewater pond, Lena felt genuine fear. Not because of the bone, not because of the photographs, because whoever had called her sounded like a man who believed every word he had just said. Chapter 4. Missing. Lena sat in her car for nearly 10 minutes after the phone call ended. Rain drummed against the roof. The windshield fogged around the edges. Outside, the flooded canal continued rushing through the darkness. She replayed the conversation several times in her mind. The voice hadn't sounded like a prank. There had been no laughter, no attempt to scare her. If anything, the man had sounded exhausted, like someone carrying a burden too heavy to keep holding. Eventually, she started the engine and headed back toward town. The storm worsened as evening approached. Sheets of rain reduced visibility to only a few yards ahead. Several roads were now completely closed. Emergency alerts flashed across her phone, warning residents to avoid travel unless necessary. By the time she reached home, the sky had turned nearly black despite the early hour. The power flickered twice while she made coffee. The third flicker lasted long enough for her to wonder if the electricity would survive the night. She carried her mug into the small office at the back of the house. Stacks of notebooks filled the shelves. Maps covered one wall. A large corkboard displayed photographs, newspaper clippings, and notes from stories she had investigated over the years. Normally, she avoided turning local curiosities into full investigations until she had evidence. Tonight felt different. She wrote 3 words on a blank sheet of paper. Wastewater facility. Then she began building a timeline. Workers gathered near pond. Strange object in mud. Flooding begins. Photos appear online. Photos removed. Human bone discovered. Anonymous phone call. The list looked absurd. Yet every item had occurred within the last 24 hours. Lena leaned back in her chair. Something connected all of it. The question was what? Her phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. The same feeling that had followed the phone call returned instantly. The message contained only one sentence. I need to meet you. Nothing else. No name, no explanation. Lena stared at the screen, then typed back. Who is this? The reply arrived almost immediately. I work at the plant. Her pulse quickened. She typed again. You're the one who called? Several minutes passed. Rain rattled the windows. Finally, another message appeared. Yes. Lena sat forward. What's your name? The answer came after another delay. Daniel. A second message followed. I can't talk on the phone anymore. That sentence bothered her more than anything else. Not won't. Can't. As if someone might be listening. Lena typed carefully. What did you mean when you said they found another body? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, because it wasn't the first one. Lena felt her stomach tighten. She stared at the words. The room suddenly seemed quieter, the storm farther away. Everything narrowed to the screen in her hand. How many? The reply took nearly a minute. I don't know. Then another. More than they tell people. Lightning flashed outside. Thunder followed immediately afterward, shaking the house. Lena looked toward the dark window. Her reflection stared back. Meet me tomorrow. No response. She waited. Nothing. Then, old bait shop. Highway 17. Noon. Come alone. The message ended there. No further explanation. No goodbye. Nothing. Lena saved the conversation and leaned back in her chair. The old bait shop had been abandoned for years. It sat along a forgotten stretch of road near the marshes east of town. Few people passed through the area anymore, which made it an ideal place for a meeting or an ambush. She considered that possibility, then dismissed it. If Daniel wanted to harm her, contacting her repeatedly made little sense. The man seemed frightened, desperate. People like that usually wanted help, not victims. Another hour passed. The storm intensified. The local news interrupted regular programming with flood coverage. Several neighborhoods were being evacuated. Water levels throughout the county continued rising. Meteorologists predicted at least another day of rain. Lena muted the television. Something about all of this felt strangely timed. The floods, the bones, the phone call, the treatment plant. As if something hidden for years had suddenly been uncovered. Around midnight, she finally went to bed. Sleep came slowly. Every creak of the house seemed louder than normal. Every gust of wind felt personal. Sometime after 2 in the morning, she drifted off. The dream began almost immediately. She stood beside one of the wastewater ponds. The sky above her was pitch black. No stars. No moon. The water stretched endlessly in every direction. Smooth, silent, still. Then ripples appeared. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Something moved beneath the surface. Not fish, not alligators. People. Faces pressed upward from below. Men, women, children. Their eyes were open, watching, waiting. The water began to rise. A pale hand emerged, then another, then dozens. The pond churned with reaching arms. Mud-covered fingers clawed toward the shore, toward her, toward the world above. Lena tried to run. Her feet wouldn't move. The dead continued rising. One face surfaced directly in front of her. A man, middle-aged, eyes clouded white. His mouth opened. Black water poured out. Then he spoke. Only 3 words. We're still here. Lena woke with a gasp. The room was dark. Rain hammered the roof. Her heart pounded against her ribs. For several seconds, she simply sat there listening, trying to convince herself it had only been a dream. Then she noticed her phone. A notification glowed on the screen. A news alert. She reached for it. The headline made her blood run cold. Wastewater plant employee reported missing during storm. Lena's eyes widened. She opened the article. The employee's name appeared in the first paragraph. Daniel Mercer. The man she was supposed to meet in 7 hours had vanished sometime during the night. Chapter 5. The Bait Shop. Lena read the article 3 times. Each time it became less convincing. According to the report, Daniel Mercer had been working an overnight shift at the Blackwater Regional Wastewater Facility when co-workers realized he was missing. His truck remained parked near one of the maintenance buildings. His badge had last been used shortly before midnight. Authorities were treating the disappearance as a missing person case. No foul play was suspected. No foul play. A man contacts a local writer, claims bodies have been discovered, claims more have been found than the public knows. schedules a secret meeting, then disappears a few hours later. And nobody suspects foul play. Lena tossed the phone onto her mattress. Sure. Outside, the storm continued raging. The clock read 5:41 a.m. She knew she wouldn't get back to sleep. By sunrise, she was already dressed and sitting at her kitchen table reviewing everything she could find about Daniel Mercer. The search yielded surprisingly little. 48 years old, married once, divorced. No children. Worked for the wastewater facility for nearly 20 years. No criminal history. No lawsuits. No public scandals. The sort of man most people would never notice, which made him perfect. People paid attention when politicians disappeared, or business owners, or wealthy landowners. Men like Daniel Mercer vanished quietly. Sometimes forever. Lena's coffee had gone cold by the time she realized she was staring out the window again. The rain was finally beginning to weaken. Not stop, just weaken. Heavy clouds still covered the county, but the violent downpour of the previous day had eased into a steady gray drizzle. Floodwater remained everywhere. Fields resembled shallow lakes. Roadside ditches overflowed. Large sections of pasture land sat underwater. The county looked less like southeast Texas and more like a drowned world slowly resurfacing. At 11 o'clock, she left for the meeting. Part of her expected the road to be closed, or the building inaccessible. Instead, she found the old bait shop exactly as she remembered it. A weathered structure leaning slightly to one side, peeling paint, broken windows, an ancient sign hanging crooked above the entrance. Years earlier, fishermen had stopped there on their way to the marshes. Now only birds and insects seemed interested in the place. Lena parked beneath a cluster of cypress trees. The area was deserted. She checked the time. 11:53. 7 minutes early. The marsh stretched behind the building. Floodwater filled portions of the low ground, creating pools that reflected the dark sky above. Somewhere nearby, a heron cried. The sound echoed across the water. Lena waited. No vehicles appeared, no movement, nothing. At noon, she remained alone. At 12:10, she began thinking Daniel's disappearance might be genuine after all. Then she noticed the truck. Not moving. Parked, hidden partially behind a stand of brush near the edge of the marsh. Her pulse quickened. The vehicle looked familiar. She had seen a photograph of it earlier that morning. A white Ford pickup. Daniel's truck. Lena stepped out of her car. The wind carried the scent of mud and stagnant water across the marsh. The truck sat roughly 100 yards away, far enough to remain hidden from the road, close enough to reach on foot. She grabbed her phone and started walking. The ground squished beneath her boots. Mosquitoes immediately found her. The farther she moved from the road, the quieter the world became. Even the birds seemed absent. Only the wind remained. The truck came into full view. The driver's side door stood slightly open. Lena stopped. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Every instinct told her to turn around and call the sheriff. Instead, she continued forward. The interior was empty. No driver, no passenger, no sign of a struggle. Yet Daniel's phone sat on the seat. So did his wallet. His keys remained in the ignition. Lena stared at them. Nobody abandoned their truck like this. Not voluntarily. A cold sensation crept up her spine. Then she noticed the mud. Footprints, dozens of them. Pressed into the wet ground behind the vehicle. Most appeared recent. Some had already begun filling with water. They led away from the truck, toward the marsh. Lena followed them with her eyes. The tracks disappeared into a stretch of flooded reeds approximately 50 yards away. She took a photograph. Then another. A sudden vibration nearly made her jump. Her phone, a new text message. Unknown number. She opened it. The message contained only 4 words. Leave. Right now. Lena froze. Another message arrived immediately afterward. They're watching you. Her heart pounded. She looked around. The marsh, the bait shop, the flooded fields. Nothing. Nobody. Yet the feeling of being observed arrived with overwhelming force. She slowly turned in a circle. The landscape appeared empty, but appearances could lie, especially in places like this. A gust of wind swept across the marsh grass. The reeds bent. Water rippled. And for a brief moment, Lena thought she saw someone standing far out among the flooded vegetation. A figure, motionless, watching. She blinked. The shape disappeared. Gone. Her breathing quickened. The text message felt heavier now, more urgent. Then she heard it, a sound drifting across the marsh. Faint, distant, human. A voice, calling for help. Lena spun toward the reeds. The voice came again. Weak, broken, almost drowned by the wind. Help! Daniel. It sounded exactly like Daniel. The voice emerged from somewhere beyond the flooded grass where the footprints vanished. Lena's stomach dropped. Because according to the sheriff's department, Daniel Mercer had been missing for nearly 12 hours. And yet his voice was calling to her from the middle of the marsh. Chapter 6. Voices in the Marsh. Lena stood perfectly still. The wind moved across the flooded reeds. The voice disappeared. For a moment, she wondered if she had imagined it. The storm, the lack of sleep, the stress. It would not be the first time a tired mind turned ordinary sounds into something else. Then she heard it again. Faint, broken, carried across the water. Help! The words seemed to come from somewhere deep within the marsh. Not from the road, not from the bait shop. Out there, beyond the reeds, beyond the flooded ground. Lena looked down at her phone. No signal. Of course, the area had always been a dead zone. She slipped the device into her pocket and stared toward the water. Every reasonable thought told her to leave. Call authorities. Let professionals search the marsh. Yet something bothered her. If Daniel was alive, every minute mattered. And if he wasn't, then who was calling? The question settled heavily in her chest. She stepped forward. The mud immediately swallowed part of her boot. The marsh had changed dramatically since the flooding began. What had once been dry grassland now resembled a shallow lake dotted with islands of vegetation. The footprints behind Daniel's truck continued into the water. Some were clear, others distorted by rain. Still, they all moved in the same direction, toward the heart of the marsh. Lena followed. The smell returned, stronger than before, not simply mud, not simply stagnant water. The same odor she had noticed near the wastewater ponds. Sweet, rotting, wrong. She covered her nose and continued. Several minutes passed. The truck disappeared behind her. The bait shop vanished from sight. The world narrowed into water, reeds, and gray sky. Then she found something. A hard hat, orange, partially submerged in muddy water. Lena crouched. The logo on the front belonged to the wastewater facility. A fresh crack ran across one side. She photographed it. Nearby lay a flashlight. Broken. Its lens shattered. The unease in her stomach deepened. Daniel had definitely been here. The question was whether he had arrived willingly. A sudden splash erupted somewhere ahead. Lena froze. The sound was large, much larger than a fish. She scanned the water. Nothing. Then another splash. Farther away? An alligator, she told herself. Southeast Texas had plenty of them. That explanation should have comforted her. It didn't. The marsh felt too quiet, too empty. Even the insects seemed absent. Only the wind remained, and occasionally that distant voice, calling, always farther ahead, always just out of reach. Help! Lena's pulse quickened. The sound was clearer now, close enough to follow. She pushed through another wall of reeds, then stopped abruptly. A small island of higher ground rose before her, only 20 feet across. A few twisted trees grew from the center. Their roots clung desperately to the saturated earth. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Then her eyes adjusted. Someone had built a structure there. Not a building, not exactly. More like a shelter. Wood, metal scraps, pieces of tarp. It looked old. Very old. As if it had existed long before the recent flooding. Lena approached cautiously. The shelter leaned beneath the weight of years. One side had partially collapsed. The remaining walls were covered in faded markings. Names, dozens of names, carved into the wood. Some recent, some weathered almost beyond recognition. Lena ran her fingers across one section. A date accompanied one of the names. Another. The breath caught in her throat. There were hundreds, maybe more. The names covered nearly every surface, as though people had been recording something here for decades. A sudden gust rattled the structure. One loose board swung open. Something fell onto the ground. A notebook. Lena bent down and picked it up. Water had damaged much of it. Many pages were unreadable. Others remained intact. She carefully opened the cover. The first page contained only a single sentence written in shaky handwriting. "If you're reading this, they found me too." Lena stared. A chill ran through her. The next several pages listed names, more names, entire pages filled with them. Some were crossed out, others circled. Several had dates beside them. Then she found an entry. One written only a few weeks earlier. Daniel Mercer. Her stomach dropped. Below the name was a short paragraph. The handwriting matched the first page. The ponds are older than the facility. People think the city built everything in the 70s. They didn't. Something was already here. Lena turned another page. Most of the writing had been ruined by water. Only fragments remained. Bones beneath the lowest basin. Workers told never to discuss findings. Old chamber. Floods expose things. Another page. More fragments. Not dumping bodies. They were already there. Lena frowned. Already there? That made no sense. The voice suddenly returned. Much closer now? Close enough that it seemed to come from just beyond the island. Help! Lena snapped her head toward the water. The voice was unmistakable. Daniel. The exact same voice from the phone call. Weak, desperate, human. Yet something about it felt wrong. The words sounded identical each time. The same tone, the same rhythm. As though a recording were being replayed. The realization sent a cold wave through her body. Then she heard something else. Movement. Behind her. A footstep. Lena spun around. No one stood there. Only the shelter, the reeds, the water. But the sensation remained. Someone had been watching. Someone close. Very close. Her eyes drifted toward the shelter again. Toward the names covering its walls. Toward the notebook in her hand. Then she noticed one final detail. Fresh carving. Fresh enough that the wood still looked pale. A name. One she recognized instantly. Daniel Mercer. Beneath it was a date. Yesterday's date. And underneath that, carved with deep, deliberate cuts, were 3 words. The water remembers.